Hi, this is Elisabeth Hancock, host of the Great Awakening podcast. So this week, I thought I would start looking at the huge amount of research and evidence that we have that show that our ancestors were probably from another planet and didn't originate or evolve on this planet at all. And I do believe that we are also not one race and not one species. We're just too varied for this. And maybe one particular line of humans was genetically altered from an ape, but there are other bloodlines and other species of human here as well. And many researchers say that we're at least 6 different races, maybe as much as 24 different races. And these are not all from this planet. So I think that our planet splits into multiple dimensions itself. And I also think that there are civilizations living under the earth, possibly multiple civilizations living under the earth, which I suspect means that we haven't quite grasped what the earth actually is yet. There are certainly many researchers who feel that Earth itself is a portal, and maybe a portal to other parts of the cosmos. Indeed, I'm not even too sure that space is exactly what we think it is. And I'm still researching all of this myself to understand more about this. But what I wanted to look at today was a piece of research which comes from the book of Adam and Eve in the Bible. I think that the Bible holds a lot of historic information for us. And there are so many books that have been left out of it, which means that what we're left with is sort of a nonsensical book which has snippets of information everywhere through it, but not one story, not one linear idea of what it is. I think our ancestors wrote down our history, wrote down things like where we came from, what happened, these sorts of things. And I think that the Bible has been so misedited, mistranslated, copied down incorrectly, maybe even on purpose, that what we're left with is a book that doesn't really make sense. But when we start to look at the other books, which we've seen have come to light through the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi texts, we can begin to get a glimpse of another way of looking at who we are, who are humans. So Enoch is the scribe of many books in the Bible. And in the book of Adam and Eve, he mentions that when one couple leave the enclosure at Gar Sag for the valley below, they notice that the substance of their bodies change and they become more dense. When I first read this, I thought, well, that sounds very interesting because more dense means that they were less dense before. Less dense seems to indicate a luminosity of some sort. And when we look at other indigenous accounts or some of the older ancient texts, we do see that our ancestors are referred to, or at least the Anunnaki, who are the sky gods from the Sumerian tablets, but they are referred to often as shining, being like shining skin, luminous skin, glistening skin. We also have these same luminous people who are described as helping humanity after a great flood. And evidence has pointed to this great flood being around 9,700 BC, which is when samples from Greenland show that there was indeed a great flood. And we also have many, many shells found on the tops of mountains, indicating that the sea was able to get to the top of the mountains, or maybe even that those mountains were once under the sea and they moved upwards, which again is what the indigenous accounts talk about. But it's not just the sky gods who are talked about as having luminous skin. The ancient Siberian and Iranian people also claimed their ancestors were less dense, and their skin was more pale and radiant, and their hair was often white. The Kalmucks and Tibetans of Central Asia also report that the bodies of these advanced people gave off light, and they were compared to stars. They lived for hundreds of years and only ate fruit from a forgotten tree. But the more they associated with the physical world, the more dense and less luminous they became, and the shorter their lifespans were. Could this even be why the Indian and other Asian caste systems prize white skin so much? Because This is a sign of being a spiritual, advanced being, like their ancestors were. And were these luminous ancestors us? Or were they advanced beings that came from other parts of the cosmos and came here for a variety of reasons, maybe even to help us, maybe even to coexist alongside us? The text talks about how long these people lived. And we can certainly see that our ancestors lived very long lives from the Sumerian kings list. And in the Bible, when it follows the ancestral line of Adam, of which Enoch is the seventh down in line, this also tells us that Enoch was one of these spiritual or advanced beings too, as his great-grandson is also described as being luminous with white hair and blue eyes. Are spiritual beings another name for extraterrestrial or transdimensional beings, those from other dimensions, people that came from other solar systems to us? So it's interesting that these same sort of luminous people with long white hair, blue eyes, that are described as physical beings in our ancient texts, and those that were more advanced, that those that were able to help the humans living on the planet. And who were the humans exactly? Possibly we have all come from different sources. When you look at the different races around the world, I feel it makes a lot more sense to see them as the beginnings of a new line, maybe a new line between a human and an extraterrestrial. Because human DNA has itself been found to go back 9 billion years, which means that what we have on this planet as human DNA definitely did not originate on this planet, which is only 4.5 billion years ago, but equally, it has come from somewhere else in the cosmos and didn't originate here. This shows that not only are there other humans out in the cosmos, but we are humans who have descended from these original humans that can be traced back to 9 billion years ago. It shows that as humans, we can possibly interbreed with each other and create new human lines, new human hybrid lines. It also shows that we have not evolved from an ape, but maybe ape DNA has been added to the human body, genetically said to be 98.9% same as an ape, but we're also genetically 98.9% the same as a pig. So where does that leave our human DNA? Well, these figures are only based on gene coding DNA, which is the DNA that creates the physical body. And of course, the studies of our DNA are only ever done on a few thousand people. And we also have evidence from Lloyd Pye to show that the geneticists were not allowed to give out certain information, which shows that the information we have on our genes currently is not all there. And we are making decisions about who we are, where we come from, based on very flawed thinking, not least because Darwin's theory of evolution has never been proven. We also have the work of Michael Cremo, who has not only discovered huge amounts of artifacts which show that there were many advanced civilizations before us, but he's also documented the discovery of many human skeletons, carbon dated to hundreds of millions of years ago, showing that we seem to be the last in a very long line of genetically mutated humans. That seems to evidence more downgrades and upgrades in our genomes. So some of these skeletons with the human round skull can be traced back hundreds of millions of years ago, which either shows that we've been around much longer than we believe we have, or it shows that there were some people that came here hundreds of millions of years ago and looked like us. Well, again, if we go back to human DNA being 9 billion years ago, indeed, there could have been some humans that came here to this planet many hundreds of millions of years ago for a variety of reasons and got stuck here and maybe even evolved here and ended up with us today. We've also got the indigenous tribes that talk about the different worlds that our planet has had. And They talk about the fourth, fifth, sixth, even seventh world, showing that what they call a world is probably a civilization. And it's a civilization that was wiped out, maybe due to catalytic events that happened, maybe even wars, maybe even some other reason. But it shows that there have been previous advanced civilizations in our world. When you combine this with the ancient artifacts that have been found, and also the 20,000 books that have been written on Atlantis, showing that Atlantis probably isn't some mythical continent that 20,000 people decide to write about. This is probably something which has elements of truth to it. And there's certainly been enough research to show that it could be true. Physicist Brooks Agnew suggests that humans are causing these cataclysms themselves because we are too low vibrational as a species, which in turn causes us to attract lower vibrations of matter, i.e. comets, meteors, and asteroids, which we are surrounded by because of the asteroid belt, which we pass through every May and November. There's even a theory that the asteroid belt is an exploded planet, and certainly this also comes up in our ancient texts as well. And I suspect that it probably is an exploded planet, which then begs the question, why did it explode? One of the other concepts that interested me about the luminous people is that these people could well be in 5D. There's a lot of talk around 3D and 5D. 3D is reality as we see it around us, which I suspect is not actually what this reality looks like. I suspect that we are supposed to be in 5D as our luminous ancestors were. I think the reason that they were luminous and they were less dense than we are now is because they came from other dimensions, and in particular, fifth dimension, which allowed them to essentially be more energy and less matter, as Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about in his workshops. This means that as they were more energy and less matter, they looked luminous. They weren't as physically dense as us. And when they descended down into the valley, they became more dense. Again, this is showing that they descended into 3D reality and became more dense. They're also described as having white hair and blue eyes, and nobody knows where blonde hair, blue eyes comes from. Of course, green and blue are said to be eyes without pigmentation, but I'm not too sure that all of the genetic alterations in us are simply mutations. And it actually makes perfect sense to think that there were other people who already possessed these physical traits, which we inherited when we interbred and started to intermingle our different species, who are all human DNA species that can be traced back 9 billion years ago. And therefore we can breed with each other, but they all have evolved, if you like, from other environments. And this has meant that they have evolved in a different way to the way that we have evolved. The raw material talks about the Atlanteans who created the new human form, which was Cro-Magnon, who can be traced back around 40,000 years ago. They harnessed the holographic field and manipulated the geometric shapes to create the physical form, the new physical form. This they did because they wanted to allow higher dimensional souls to incarnate into this world so we could start ascending as a species, because our ancestors were genetically downgraded and forgot who they were. I think we've been suppressed for so long that we have forgotten who we are, which is a fractal of Source, a sovereign being of the universe, and a higher dimensional soul ourselves. Cro-Magnon was the first human form to start bringing in higher dimensional souls, and that was 30,000, 40,000 years ago. So since then, we've had starseeds incarnating into this reality, into this world for a very long time. Now, with the rising energies of the planet, as we can see with the Schumann resonance, and the light codes streaming in from the stars, sun, and the cosmos, combined with this new extraterrestrial DNA coming in from starseeds, we are beginning to get back on track with our evolution into a 5D consciousness world again. This fills me with a huge amount of hope, and which is why I want to pass on this hope to you as well. As we start to raise our own vibration out of the illusion of fear, we will understand that we already are in 5D. It is only our minds that have been trapped into 3D. But this planet and everything on it has always been in 5D. So have hope. Focus on positivity and manifesting the type of reality that you want to live in. We are all manifesting the reality that we choose to live in, that we choose to exist in. So now is the time to start manifesting the reality that you want. How do you want this planet to look? Whatever it is, we are all manifesting everything into being now. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week. I hope it gave you some hope in these chaotic and weird times. Okay, I look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care. Bye.